This is Nikki Nakayama. She's a very successful chef, a true expert of the art of cooking. In an interview, talking about her job, Nakayama has said things like this. Cooking is the one thing that I feel I can completely trust what I'm doing. When I'm planning a dish, my mind is completely shut off. It's all based on feeling. This has to be here, this has to be here, this feels right here, this looks right here. She has also said this. The best advice that I've been giving was to never stop learning, because the moment you give up and think you know everything, you're done as a chef. There seems to be a tension in these comments, a tension that reflects a philosophical problem in understanding skillful action. In her first statement, she says, "My mind is completely shut off, it's all based on feeling," and this suggests that in her skillful action, there is no place for reflection. But when she claims that skilled performers should never stop learning, this suggests that reflection must always remain engaged in performance, no matter how skilled you are. And this takes us to our main question. Do we or do we not reflect while performing skillful actions? In my paper, I offer an answer to this question, relying on available empirical evidence on skilled bodily action. The first step is to set up the debate between philosophical views of skilled action. After doing this, I will examine evidence of 3 psychological phenomena that have recently been interpreted as offering strong support for an anti-intellectualist view of skilled action. Finally, I argue that the evidence rather supports a not-so-extreme form of intellectualism, which I have called attention control intellectualism. Traditionally, the debate has been waged between intellectualism and anti-intellectualism. Intellectualism is usually understood as the view that knowing how is reducible to a kind of knowing that, whereas anti-intellectualism is usually understood as the view that the performance of skillful action does not require reflection. But let's look at anti-intellectualism a bit closer. Maurice Merleau-Ponty has usually been interpreted as a champion of this form of anti-intellectualism. And he has this great description of the player on the field as he plays football. He says, "For the player in action, the football field is pervaded with lines of force and articulated in sectors, which call for a certain mode of action and which initiate and guide the action as if the player were unaware of it. The player becomes one with the field and feels the direction of the goal, for example, just as immediately as the vertical and horizontal planes of his own body." From Merleau-Ponty's perspective, skillful action is not at all about reflecting, but rather about simply feeling and responding to the calls for action that are present in the field. Acting skillfully is not about reflecting, but about allowing the well-trained habits and feelings to take over and respond to the situation. Now, although intellectualism has usually been characterized as the view that knowing how is reducible to knowing that, this is only one kind in a variety of intellectualism, which I might call propositional intellectualism. This is the view that the mental manipulation of propositions is a necessary component of skillful performance. The view that knowing how is a kind of knowing that is usually associated with the work of Jason Stanley and Timothy Williamson. But there is actually at least one more propositional intellectualist view, which we can call enscombionism. The view that to perform skillful actions, you must know why you are doing what you are doing and how it is that you do it. And in fact, you must act on the basis of such knowledge. But not all intellectualism is propositional. My paper proposes what I call attention control intellectualism, according to which performing a skilled action requires that during the action, the performer's attention is structured top-down by her current performance-related intentions. That's the view that I want to defend. I think this is what the available evidence suggests. I want to examine some psychological phenomena that have recently been considered to speak in favor of anti-intellectualism, but that I think, upon closer inspection, turn out to support attention control intellectualism. These phenomena are called choking or yipping, expertise-induced amnesia, and expert confabulation. It seems that if you think too much about what you are doing, you choke and you mess things up. Psychologists call this choking under pressure. Choking under pressure, in the psychologist's sense of the term, is a performance that is below what is expected given the agent's skill level in a high-pressure situation. That is, a situation where the agent feels that performing well is highly important. The anti-intellectualist thinks that choking or yipping supports his view or her view because the cause of choking seems to be excessive self-reflection of the kind necessary to be able to answer enscombient questions. Choking suggests that reflection does not help and even hinders skilled action. Thinking doesn't help, and it can lead the performer to paralysis. Now, it is clear that skillful action requires that you automate many aspects of performance that were originally effortful and needed concentration. But once you've automated these routines, that automation seems to generate something psychologists call expertise-induced amnesia, a disconnection between what is done and what is accessible to self-report. Many expert testimonies corroborate this. Take basketball star Larry Bird. He says, "A lot of the things I do on the court are just reactions to situations." Or Hall of Fame NFL running back Walter Payton. He says, "People ask me about this move or that move, but I don't know why I did something, I just did it." And also philosophical baseball catcher Yogi Berra. Think, he says, how can you hit and think at the same time? Expertise-induced amnesia speaks against intellectualism about expert action, because if an agent's behavior was controlled by a reflective process, the agent should be able to report at least some aspects of what she did and how she did it. The fact that many experts say that they don't know how they do things suggests that skilled actions are controlled automatically. That said, some experts do make claims about what they do and how they do it, but surprisingly, these reports often turn out to be wrong. Study suggests that the rules experts believe to be following, about, for example, how and where to focus attention, turn out to misdescribe what they actually do. Cricket and baseball batters, for example, are taught to always keep their eyes on the ball, and many think that that's just what they're doing when they perform. But when researchers put eye trackers on them to test this, they conclude that the more experienced the batter is, the less time her eyes spend focusing on the ball. The expert batter's eyes move quickly away from the ball, actually, to the place where they anticipate that the ball will bounce. The more expert the player, the faster the eye movement, so expertise is inversely proportional to the time spent watching the ball. And this seems to support anti-intellectualism. The fact that the explicit rules and beliefs of performance misdescribe their own performance suggests that the reflective thinking doesn't control their skillful behavior. In fact, if skilled agents actually followed their explicit claims about what they should do, their performance would be worse off. So, we have three psychological phenomena: choking or yipping, expertise-induced amnesia, and expert confabulation. The key question now is, do these three psychological phenomena provide solid support for anti-intellectualism? To answer this, we will have to look at the evidence more closely. Let's start with choking under pressure. Anti-intellectualists say that performing skilled actions well is inversely proportional to self-focused awareness. The more you focus on what you're doing, the more you are meddling with your automatic control systems, and the more likely you are to choke. But let's take a step back. It's not clear whether choking and the yips refer to a single phenomenon, or whether they refer to different conditions. Moreover, if the phenomena have to do with reflective overthinking, it's not clear what it is that people are reflectively thinking about when they choke. So, more conceptual clarity is needed here. As it turns out, there are two main theories about why skilled performers choke under pressure: explicit monitoring theory and distraction theory. Explicit monitoring theory holds that high pressure leads the agent to think about previously automated aspects of performance, and this disrupts her automatic control over performance. But distraction theory states that high pressure causes the agent to reflect on aspects extraneous to her task. That might be the outcomes at stake, or whether she's going to be able to do it or not, or what people might think. And this occupies attentional and working memory resources, and thereby disrupts performance. Each theory points to a different relation between reflection and choking. But which one is right? Apparently both. Work by psychologist Marcy DeCaro shows that two different kinds of pressure seem to have two different effects on attention, and this in turn seems to cause two different performance failures. There are two different sources of pressure. One of them is the pressure of being monitored by others, and the other one is the pressure of there being high stakes in the performance. Now, the first kind of pressure, the pressure of being monitored, affects intuitive kinds of tasks. That's tasks that don't involve working memory much. But the pressure of high stakes affects reflective tasks. That is, tasks that are working memory intensive. And notably, one kind of pressure affects one kind of task, but not the other. So we actually seem to have two different phenomena here. One of them we can call yipping, and that is the performance failure that is due to focusing on automated action components while being monitored by others. This kind of phenomenon would lead to disrupting intuitive tasks. But on the other hand, we have choking, which would be the performance failure that is due to focusing on task extraneous features of the environment in a situation of high stakes. And this would interrupt control over reflective tasks, but not intuitive ones. Now, to clarify this conceptually, we can follow David Papineau's work that distinguishes basic actions, that is, actions that you can immediately decide to do, and action components, the components of such basic actions that you don't directly decide to do, but that constitute your action. One example of basic actions would be cycling, and then examples of action components of this basic action would be steering the bicycle or pedaling or directing the gaze at the crucial places. If we do this distinction, then we have that choking and yipping would be two different kinds of a more general phenomenon called not having your mind right. And the yips would be a situation in which you don't have your mind right because you're attending to automated action components, and this leads you to performance failure. But choking, on the other hand, would be the case of not having your mind right because you divert attention away from an action, and this leads to performance failure of a different kind. If this is so, then reflecting on action components is harmful to performance, but reflective focus on the intended action seems necessary for skilled action. And the more pressure there is on the agent to perform, the more reflective control seems to be needed. Simply letting automaticity take control seems insufficient for skilled intentional action performance at the highest levels, mainly because expert-level performance situations are often crowded with distracting forces, like fans expecting so much of you, or fans of the other team yelling nasty things at you, or everyone at home thinking about how you're doing, or your own worries about ability, future outcomes, etc. Now, there is suggestive empirical support for expertise-induced amnesia. Bylock and colleagues studied the performance of novice and expert golfers while putting and their ability to report how they do what they do. They found that the experts' descriptions about how to do this in general were much longer and much more precise than the episodic descriptions of how they themselves putt. In fact, the shortest of all descriptions were those of experts describing how it is that they do their putting. But intellectualists have a few concerns about this argument. First of all, there is a worry that Bylock's studies don't contain any real experts. And this depends on how you define expertise, because some people think that experts are just people that have a high level of skill, but some others think that expertise is qualitatively different from mere skill, in the sense that experts are those who are at the top of the game and can deliver world-class performance. So if you define expertise as top world-class level performance, then Bylock's studies don't seem to include any expert at all. This seems to undermine the support that anti-intellectualists derive from expertise-induced amnesia on the basis of Bylock studies. But remember the reports of experts that I stated before. This is of course merely anecdotal, but it's a notorious fact that many experts describe themselves as not knowing what they do while they do it. The problem though is that there is contrary anecdotal evidence. Some studies have used retrospective methods like diaries and verbal recollection to find out what professional athletes think about while performing at their top level. And when they're asked how they coped with pressure, it was found that the most effective coping strategies that were used on a frequent basis were increasing concentration on task and increasing effort. And to maintain high-quality performance in high-pressure situations, athletes report relying on positive monitoring strategies, such as I focus on what I should do and I make sure that I work harder. This is evidence in favor of attention control intellectualism, in the sense that skilled agents must reflect because they have to exert an effortful top-down executive control of their attention, so that they can structure it in accordance with their intention, and not let it be detoured by some other distraction. From this perspective, intellectualists can counter the anti-intellectualist interpretation of the statements of Larry Bird and others. Such statements need not be taken as evidence for the view that the control of skilled action consists solely in automatic, intuitive, feeling-based control. Because in high-pressure situations, top-level experts do seem to know what they must do. They must focus on what they are doing. In this sense, Larry Bird's claim that many things he does in the court are but reactions to the situation may be taken to refer to his performance of action components rather than actions themselves. And Payton's statement that he doesn't know what he does is compatible with attention control intellectualism. Also, in claiming that you can't think and hit the ball at the same time, Berra may mean that you can hit properly when thinking about action components or extraneous situational features. Rather, you must just focus on the action of hitting itself. Now, on to expert confabulation. Remember that batters say they try to keep their eyes on the ball, but eye tracking evidence suggests that the more experienced the batter is, the less time her eyes spend focusing on the ball. Additionally, cricket training makes special emphasis on the importance of watching the ball at the precise time that you're hitting it. And this is particularly unlikely because of the high speed at which the ball travels. So experts seem to be just wrong in reporting that they keep their eyes on the ball, that they do at the crucial time of striking it, and even that doing it is what should be done. However, the Landon McLeod study that this comes from seems susceptible to the same kind of terminological objection as those of Bylock and colleagues. Experts are roughly understood as those participants with the highest degree of skill, and this assumes that there is merely a quantitative difference between skill and expertise, but it runs the risk of not finding qualitative differences between them due to the lack of top-level experts. So, would world-class performers reveal the same performance pattern? Mann and colleagues tested this by comparing highly skilled club-level performers who play at local cricket clubs and elite performers, that is, players with some of the highest historical records in the game. And they found that while highly skilled performers actually lose the ball from sight and make only one predictive saccade to try to find the place where the ball will bounce, and also can't see the ball when they hit it, they found that elite performers consistently follow the ball throughout the whole trajectory with their heads, even if not with their eyes. Also, that they make not one, but two predictive saccades. First, toward the place where the ball may bounce, and then toward the place where the ball may make contact with the bat. Crucially, the second saccade enables elite performers to see the ball as they hit it, much more reliably than the club-level performers. So it initially seemed that skilled batters do not keep their eyes on the ball and fail to see the ball as it was hit, and that there is no systematic difference in eye movement between skill levels, all of which would support expert confabulation. But the study of elite batters puts all that into question. It reveals that explicit coaching advice and performance rules are actually much more consistent with top-level practice, that there are qualitative and not just quantitative differences between experts and skilled performers, and therefore that there is really no definitive evidence that real experts confabulate. So I have examined 3 psychological phenomena and asked whether they support anti-intellectualism about skilled action. My answer is, well, not really. What they actually seem to support is attention-controlled intellectualism. So let me talk a little bit about what I mean by this term. Any intellectualism says that reflection is necessary for performing skillful actions. So the crucial distinctive feature of each intellectualist position is what they mean by reflection. What I mean by reflection is the top-down, intention-directed modulation of attention. The crucial contribution of reflection is the inhibition of task-irrelevant calls for action or affordances. To explain this, let me go back to the football example. Suppose that that's me, and that this is my old-time friend. And because we're friends, just the situation of meeting her just affords my saying hi to her. But she's also in the opposite team and she's just scored a goal against me. So I'm angry at her and I feel like I should yell at her or something. But I'm also sore in my foot, so I would really like to take a break. And there is also great weather right now, so the beautiful grass invites me to rest on it. So you get the point. There are too many affordances in this situation, and I can easily be distracted from what I actually am trying to do. So I need top-down executive control of my attention in order to get to perform the full action in a coherent way. If this happens with someone like me, I'm not a real expert at soccer. Imagine what might happen to real experts like the ones in the picture. There might be so many affordances and so many distracting forces throughout the whole field that you really need some inhibitory control over your attention so that you can focus on what you're doing. The crucial lesson from the discussion above is that achieving an appropriate distinction between relevant and irrelevant affordances is hardly possible, if at all, without the top-down modulation of attention on the basis of an occurrent, higher-order intention. I can focus on the soccer-based affordances only if I manage to inhibit the environment's invitations for chatting, punching, resting, and so on. But doing so implies the use of executive functions, particularly of the one called inhibitory control. This is the key function that reflection must perform in skilled action, stopping task-unrelated affordances from taking my attention away from the task at hand. And that's why anti-intellectualist descriptions of skilled action are incomplete. Go back to Merleau-Ponty's classic description of a player in the field. The description makes it seem like we don't need any top-down processes because the field itself, with its lines of force, guides our action without our needing to do anything else. What Merleau-Ponty doesn't say is that the field is usually pervaded with way too many lines of force, calling for way too many responses that could guide our behavior in all sorts of incoherent directions. To be sure, automatic control over the action subroutines is necessary to explain why the fields of force guide the action as if the player were unaware. But automatic control is insufficient to account for how we can control a complex basic action as a whole. To do this, we need to inhibit the lines of force that are irrelevant and select only those that are relevant to the action we are trying to perform. And this is why, as we have seen, experts recognize that they have to effortfully direct attention to what they're doing. They might otherwise explode in anger, take an untimely pause, go yell at some fans of the opposite team, keep celebrating the last goal for way too long, have an emotional meltdown, and so on. To conclude, what emerges from this discussion is a form of intellectualism that's not centered on my propositional knowledge of the ways in which I act or on my ability to answer Enscombian questions about my performance, but that is grounded on my capacity to modulate attention in relation to a higher order goal. This intellectualist account, which I have called attention control intellectualism, can make Niki Nakayama's claims consistent. While performing, the expert's mind is silent about how to perform and why, but it keeps all of its attention focused on the action she's performing. And continuous learning may be a necessary consequence of the constant top-down focus of attention on the task at hand, in the sense that the refinement of attention is likely to lead to discovering novel nuances and action possibilities.